Two heads, one tail, Yang Yin. Two heads, one tail, Yang Yin. Two tails, one head, Yang Yang. Two tails, one head, Yang Yang. 3 heads, old yang. Two heads, one tail. Young yin. There it is. Whoops. I had my finger on the dot. So you see that was the yin. All right. You know what? We had an old yang before, so it would actually look like this. Sorry. There we are. All right. Our bottom or lower or inner rather trigram will be read as open, open, closed, or broken, broken, solid. This is the trigram. Jen Mountain. The mountain is still. It is a limit where you must stop. Jen brings each cycle to an end, defining a space where we can recognize, assimilate, and complete our experience. He creates a personal still center amid change, where we can retreat for perspective and a firm foundation for new growth. He is well-grounded, confident, and of independent spirit. He is still and knows. Mountain is the youngest son, child of maturity. In the cycle of directions and seasons, he is the northeast, late winter approaching spring, the pivot between cycles. And our top or outer trigram of our primary hexagram will be read as solid, solid, broken. This trigram is the trigram Dewey, lake or marsh. Dewey is lake and marsh, abundant energy that teems with life. She is the impulse to communicate, share and exchange, and delights in both inner and outer conversation. She brings things into circulation and gives them voice. This is the sheer enjoyment of participating in life to the full, expressing ourselves and hearing others and satisfying our desires. Lake is the youngest daughter, spirit of the fertile west and of autumn. Dewey, lake or marsh above Jen Mountain, give us the hexagram. 31. Once our fifth line transforms from an old yang to a young yin, it'll give us a top trigram of solid, broken, broken. This is the trigram. Zen, thunder. Thunder is shock, upheaval, and the spark of the new. In old Chinese belief, thunder slept in the earth over winter and erupted from it in spring, awakening living things into new growth. Thunder is our basic drive for renewal. He inspires initiative and decisive action. He is the stimulus that sets things in motion. He is the eldest son in the Trigram family, the first connection of heaven, potential, with earth, realization. Yang makes itself known here, emerging into the field and beginning to grow. Thunder belongs to the east and to spring. Zen thunder above Gen Mountain gives us a supporting hexagram of 62. We'll be getting the titles of each of our hexagrams from the Taoist I-ming by I-ming, which he wrote in 1796 as a Taoist adept. Oops, put these in a weird order. Here, let's do this. So 31, our primary hexagram is called sensitivity, harmonization of the celestial and the earthly. And our supporting hexagram 62 is predominance of the small, being fulfilled but acting empty, inwardly strong, outwardly yielding, inwardly firm, outwardly flexible. We'll start by reading from Hilary Barrett's I-ming, Walking Your Path, Creating Your Future. It's a beginner's I-ming commentary, pretty much. Hexagram 31. When we come to the I-ming and bring a question for the oracle, that question will have the general context of how can I act in creative relation with the spirits or forces shaping this moment of time. The answer to that question we'll understand when we understand how the parts of our reading work together. The key to understanding a reading is to know your way around its main components, how they fit together, and the different roles they play. If your reading includes changing lines, which ours does, the 5th line, then you will need to understand primary hexagram, relating hexagram, and changing lines together. The two hexagrams in conversation with one another map out your whole answer. The primary hexagram shows you quite directly what your answer involves. The relating hexagram generally describes what your answer is about for you. It sets the primary hexagram in a broader context, an influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. If the two hexagrams map out a landscape for you, then the changing lines stick a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. They are the immediate answer to your question. As the most specific, focused part of a reading, their message always takes precedence over all other elements. For example, the primary hexagram might describe a reassuringly secure situation, but a changing line could warn how insecure your position is within it. So she calls our primary hexagram 31 influence. Key questions: what influence is active and what does it draw you towards? What is its place in your life? Oracle. Influence, creating success, constancy bears fruit. taking a woman, good fortune. Influence is what moves people and how people are open and available to be moved, by emotion or inspiration, physical responses, or visiting spirits. All these things touch, stir, and attract us, drawing us into relationship. The Chinese character for influence shows a mouth and a weapon. The influence goes deep and makes us vulnerable. It is good to respond to the power of influence with constancy, steadying the motion it inspires and creating a place in your life to contain it. The man who takes a woman in marriage brings her into his home and makes room for her there. Good fortune comes from this more feminine way of relating, being open and allowing space for new influences. Image. Above the mountain is a lake. Influence. A noble one accepts people with emptiness. The lake can form because the mountain makes space for it, yet still remains inwardly solid. With solid rock on the inside, there can be clear water above. Without it, there would only be mud throughout. In the same way, the noble one accepts people into an empty space. He ensures that he can hear and receive others without confusing his self with theirs. Sequence. The I Ching is divided into two canons. The upper canon ends with hexagram 31, clarity, and the lower canon begins here. Influence follows from all the hexagrams that precede it. There is heaven and earth, and so there are the 10,000 things. There are the 10,000 things, and so there is man and woman. There is man and woman, and so there is husband and wife. There is husband and wife, and so there is father and son. There is father and son, and so there is ruler and minister. There is ruler and minister, and so there is higher and lower. There is higher and lower, and so there is a place for rights and justice to operate. This is a creation story for the human world. How it arises from relationships, beginning with the first two hexagrams and culminating in harmonious ways to relate to people and to the spirits. It sets attraction and influence in context, showing how people belong together and complement one another. Pair. Influence forms a pair with hexagram 32, lasting. Influence calls lasting endures. Influence is a time to be called and moved. It is always an encounter with something new. And we will also read our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. Hexagram 62, Hilary Barrett calls that's 61. Small exceeding. Key questions. Do you need to cross a line? What small things can you do to meet the needs of the situation? How can you take even more care? Oracle. Small exceeding, creating success. Constancy bears fruit. Allows small works, does not allow great works. A bird in flight leaves its call. Going higher is not fitting. Coming down is fitting. Great good fortune. Exceeding or going past is a transition, the moment when you step over a line. And small exceeding means making this crossing in small ways, going beyond boundaries and structures, but paying close attention to them, always responding and adjusting like a humble traveler crossing over great mountains. This is a creative way to engage with the world. No matter how small you feel, you're in no position to realize great things all at once. But it is worthwhile to do the smaller things that are within your capacity, taking small steps with consistent purpose. Small exceeding is like a bird in flight, small, exposed and vulnerable as it crosses over a vast expanse of sky. It must come down and settle eventually, and even as it passes by and is gone, its call reminds you not to go against your nature and overreach yourself. For your own unique call to be heard, you need to fly closer to the ground and pay attention to details, creating a more sensitive connection with your world. When you come down to earth in this way, scaling down your aspirations, crossing over in small ways and doing small works, then you enjoy great good fortune. Image. Above the mountain is thunder, small exceeding. A noble one in actions exceeds in respect. In loss exceeds in mourning. In spending exceeds in economy. Distant thunder is heard far over the mountains. A noble one's actions rest on a firm knowledge of limits, but also go just a little beyond them, like the soft sound of the thunder, carrying beyond its origins. He will do more than is expected of him to honor a transition, paying careful attention to what is irreversible and exceeding what might be considered sufficient and sensible in his response. So he shows more respect for all involved, mourns the losses more freely, and also takes more care over expenditure, making provision for the future. Sequence. Small exceeding follows from Hexagram 61, Inner Truth. To have trust naturally means acting on it, and so small exceeding follows. When you are filled with inner conviction, you are naturally moved to action. The truth you experienced inwardly becomes a message you must carry safely out into the world. We'll now turn back to our primary hexagram and read our changing line, line 5, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. It takes precedence over all other elements. Line 5 has the general context of strength and self-determination, clear vision, being in command. So line 5 of our primary hexagram 31, influence. There's a funny picture I gotta show you. This lady is seriously influencing somebody. I think it's me. All right. Changing line 5 of hexagram 31, influence. Influence in the neck and shoulders, no regrets. Your neck and shoulders are both strong and flexible. They control your stance and how you look out on the world. When influence reaches this point, you respond with alert attention to your environment. This imperfect, real world this imperfect, real world your inspirations must connect with. Jeez. And when you heed the influence and choose to change direction, you move your neck and shoulders first. This influence affects your attitude, but cannot run away with you. It forms a strong partnership with your will and purpose. With choices and connections consciously made, there is no call for regrets. We'll now turn to James Dekorne, his Gnostic Book of Changes. I've left links to his take on our hexagrams in the description box below. He calls hexagram 31, or primary hexagram, initiative or influence. Other titles might be influence, wooing, attraction, sensation, stimulation, conjoining, feelings, sensitivity, sensing, affection, influencing to action, tension, seeking union, persuasion, courting response, importuning, judgment, leg. Upon fulfillment of the conditions implied in initiative, there will be free course and success. Advantage depends upon firm correctness, as in marrying a young lady. Good fortune. Wilhelm/Baines. Influence, success. Perseverance furthers. To take a maiden to wife brings good fortune. Ritsima/Karcher. Conjoining, growing. harvesting trial, grasping womanhood significant. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of the influence that separated parts of an intrinsic whole have on each other. It emphasizes that bringing these parts into contact is the adequate way to handle the situation. Wu, affection, indicates pervasion and advantage to be persevering. There will be good fortune to marry a young woman. The image, leg. The image of a marsh over a mountain forms initiative. The superior man frees his mind of preoccupation so that he is open to the influence of others. Literally, thus the superior man receives people by virtue of emptiness. Wilhelm/Baines, a lake on the mountain, the image of influence. Thus the superior man encourages people to approach him by his willingness to receive them. Lu, the lake on top of the mountain symbolizes attraction. With a humble manner, the superior man receives people. Ritsuma/Karcher, above mountain possessing marsh, conjoining. A chunsu, or chief son, or superior person, uses emptiness to acquiesce people. Cleary 2, there is a lake atop a mountain, sensing. Developed people accept others with openness. Wu, there is a marsh in the mountain, this is affection. Thus the junsi, or chief son, or superior person, receives people with humility. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. Initiative is here used in the sense of mutually influencing. The magnetic trigram is above and the dynamic trigram is below. Their two influences move, respond, and unite with each other. The male is placed below the female. His repression is her satisfaction and brings fulfillment. Advantage depends upon firm correctness, as in the marrying of a young lady. Heaven and earth stimulate each other, and all things attain birth. The sages stimulate the minds of men, and harmony is born. If we examine the pattern of these influences, the nature of heaven and earth is revealed. Leg. The lines of the hexagram all deal with moving or influencing to movement, and the figure is an essay on the different ways of creating an influence, and the results engendered thereby. The lower trigram of the youngest son supports the upper trigram of the youngest daughter in happy union. This is correct because the lower trigram, here yang, should always take the initiative. No influence is so powerful and constant as that between husband and wife, and where they are both young, it is especially active. Therefore, mutual influence, correct in itself, and for correct ends, is sure to be effective. Notes and paraphrases. Judgment. Initiative succeeds only when it originates from the self. The superior man clears his mind and remains receptive to the will of the self. Wilhelm's translation of the name of this hexagram is influence, but I have chosen initiative to emphasize the idea of the proper source of the influence implied in the symbolism. Webster's Third New International Dictionary defines initiative as follows. Initiative 1, an introductory step or movement, an act designed to originate or set on foot as a process or train of events. Often used in the phrase on one's own initiative, as in, don't blame me, he acted on his own initiative. The judgment states that the situation can be furthered only by the firm correctness associated with the proper contracting of a marriage. We already know that the symbolism of marriage refers to a union of opposites within the psyche. To understand what is meant by the proper contracting of a marriage, we need only look at hexagram number 54, propriety, or the marrying maiden, to see the improper way to do it. That is, when the woman takes the initiative. Far from being a sexist idea, the symbolism reveals a profound archetypal truth. The polarity of forces in the psyche shows the ego as magnetic to the dynamic self. That is, the conscious ego complex in any psyche, male or female, is feminine or magnetic in relation to the self, which is masculine or dynamic. In the I Ching, the self is symbolized by heaven and the ego is symbolized by earth. This primordial relationship between the two qualities is found in many symbol systems. Here's the Kabbalistic version. quote from D. Fortune in the mystical Kabbalah. This clearly indicates the function of polarity that prevails between the planes of form and the planes of force. The planes of form being the female aspect, polarized and made fertile by the influences of the planes of force. The Hermetic tradition describes it this way, a quote from the Kabbalion. There is this dual aspect in the mind of every person. The I, self, represents the masculine principle of mental gender. The me, ego, represents the female principle. In the contracting of a marriage between heaven and earth, uniting the polarities within the divided psyche, the ego must learn, usually through great suffering, that its correct role is a magnetic one in relation to that of the self. The work cannot progress until this lesson has been learned and accepted completely. As long as the ego insists on taking dynamic initiative as usual in the illusory world of appearances, the results can only be the kind of objective world we inhabit, one of chaos and strife. The lesson of this hexagram, then, is the realization that the only correct source of power lies with the self, and that the ego must yield to that source as a bride to her bridegroom. Unfortunately, the contemporary relationship between the sexes has become so confused that this metaphor is seldom effective in conveying the profound truth it represents. The self, the causal body of theosophy, dwells beyond the restrictions of space-time and is preeminently suited for directing the work. Since it can see ahead, so to speak, and it knows the effects of all the available choices, the ego, on the other hand, dwells in space-time and is able to take action. By its choices, it makes or breaks the work. The ideal reciprocity between ego and self is a simple and logical division of labor. The self can see ahead but cannot take direct action, and the ego can take direct action but cannot see ahead. For the ego to act without direction from the self is to grope blindly in the dark, and the work clearly cannot progress under such circumstances. The superior man, therefore, clears his mind and remains receptive to the will of the self. Obviously, it takes time to learn how to do this properly. In its initial stages, that's what the work is all about. Quote from the Kabbalion: the majority of people are more or less the slaves of heredity, environment, etc., and manifest very little freedom. They are swayed by the opinions, customs, and thoughts of the outside world, and also by their emotions, feelings, moods, etc. They manifest no mastery worthy of the name. The second and third sentences in the Confucian commentary elicit the sexual symbolism in this hexagram quite clearly. The female trigram is above, and the male trigram is below. Their two influences move, respond, and unite with each other. The male is placed below the female. His repression is her satisfaction and brings fulfillment. Blofeld comments on this in a footnote. I doubt if this should be regarded as shedding light upon the ancient Chinese concept of the most acceptable position for intercourse. It is more likely to mean that the girl is able to depend upon the man as a plant depends upon the earth for its nourishment. Symbolism works on many levels, and Blofeld's aborted insight does apply to some of them. It is an established fact that the sentences in question accurately describe tantric sexual techniques practiced in the Orient for millennia. To understand the principles of the work, we must be able to see the obvious as symbolic of an abstraction and vice versa. Sexual polarity is a very tricky and volatile symbol because we are predisposed to confine it to its most literal meaning. The hardest part of symbolic interpretation is to know where in the continuum a specific symbol belongs in any given situation. Without changing lines, this hexagram suggests that you examine your impulses and motivations to act and see if they are truly in accordance with the goals of the work. The figure can sometimes take on the meaning of importuning, to press or urge with frequent or unreasonable requests or troublesome persistence. In other words, you might be importuning the oracle for answers which it is of no mind to give you. It is also significant to note that every line has a more or less negative connotation. These are all very strong warnings to the ego to control its compulsive need to take the initiative, to influence the situation. Calm down. Reality is not what it appears to be. Please allow the self to direct the work. Suggestions for meditation. Compare the concepts in this hexagram with hexagram number 54, propriety, number 53, gradual progress, and number 11, harmony. How do they all deal with the symbol of marriage as an aspect of the work? Compare the first 3 lines with hexagram number 52, keeping still. Initiative is the first hexagram of part 2 of the I-ming. Why do you suppose the book was divided into 2 unequal sections? Why did the division appear between the 30th and 31st hexagrams? An even division would be between the 32nd and 33rd. A quote from Feng Yulan in A Short History of Chinese Philosophy. The I-ming was originally divided into 2 books. Appendix 6 considers the first of these as dealing with the world of nature, and the second as dealing with that of man. What insights does the alchemical concept of the unus mundus bring to bear on these questions? And our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence a direction, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. James Dekorne calls our supporting hexagram 62 small powers. Other titles might be preponderance of the small, the symbol of excess in small things, the small get by, slight excess, small exceeding, small surpassing, excess of the small, small gains, conscientiousness, smallness in excess, exceeding the mean, proliferation of details. A quote from D.F. Hook, like a bird, do not fly too high or attempt too much, because this will lead to disaster. Judgment, leg. Small powers indicates that there will be progress and attainment in small affairs, but not in great affairs. It will be advantageous to be firm and correct. It is like the song of a flying bird. It is better to descend than to ascend. In this way, there will be good fortune. Blowfold, the small get by, success. Persistence in a righteous course brings reward. Small things can be accomplished now, but not great ones. When birds fly high, their singing is out of tune. The humble, but not the mighty, are favored now with great good fortune. To aim high now would be to put ourselves out of accord with the times. Lu, slight excess, success. Continuing is of benefit. Undertaking small things, not great things. The song of the flying bird. It is not good to go up. It is good to stay below. Great good fortune. Slight excess signifies the slight excess or small mistake that can prevent the achievement of great things. Ritzema/Karcher. Small exceeding, growing. Harvesting trial. Permitting small affairs, not permitting great affairs. Flying bird, abandoning's sound. Above not proper, below proper. The great significant. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of an overwhelming variety of encounters and details. It emphasizes that an excessive concern with adapting yourself to these inner and outer events is the adequate way to handle it. The image, leg. The image of thunder above a hill forms small powers. The superior man, in accordance with this, in his conduct exceeds in humility, in mourning exceeds in sorrow, and in his expenditure exceeds in economy. Wilhelm/Baines. Thunder on the mountain, the image of preponderance of the small. Thus in his conduct, the superior man gives preponderance to reverence. In bereavement, he gives preponderance to grief. In his expenditures, he gives preponderance to thrift. The superior man derives an imperative from this image. He must always fix his eyes more closely and more directly on duty than does the ordinary man. Even though this might make his behavior seem petty to the outside world, he is exceptionally conscientious in his actions. Commentary, Confucius/Leg. In small powers, we see the magnetic lines exceeding the others and giving the intimation of progress and attainment. To be advantageous, such excesses must be associated with firm correctness and must always be in harmony with the requirements of the time. The magnetic lines are in the central places, and hence it is said that small excesses may be done in small affairs with good effect. Of the dynamic lines, one is not in its proper place, and the other is not central. Thus it is said that small excesses should not be done in great affairs. In the hexagram, we have the symbol of the flying bird, whose song reminds us that it is better to descend than to ascend. To ascend is contrary to what is reasonable in the case, while to descend is natural and right. Leg. The meaning of this hexagram, in which an excess of yin lines prevails, may be grasped by contrasting its image with that of hexagram number 28, critical mass, in which an excess of yang lines prevails. Here the idea is the prevalence of small or inferior powers, and the lesson to be learned is how to distinguish essentials from non-essentials. Is it ever good to deviate from the established course of procedure? The answer is that it is permissible only in small matters, but never in matters of import. Sometimes form may be dispensed with, but never substance, and the thing must always be done responsibly and with appropriate humility. The symbol of the bird is to teach humility. It is better for it to descend, keeping near to where it can perch and rest, than to ascend into the homeless regions of the upper air. Notes and paraphrases. Judgment. Ground your flights of fancy. The superior man bends over backwards to be correct. Small power shows the preceding figure of inner truth turned inside out. Here the magnetic lines are all on the outside, uncontained and uncontrolled. The hexagram often reflects a situation in which the archetypes, the passions, appetites, emotions, drives, and instincts have left their proper places within the psyche and are flying free like birds escaped from the zoo. Most of the lines either depict the danger of such a situation or warn about how to control it. A quote from E.C. Whitmont in The Symbolic Quest. In this inflated, compulsive state of identity, we and the drive are at our most harmful. The drive will unfold and we will act out its extreme, inappropriate, and destructive side. In the process, we get the worst of it, along with the other people involved. The wrong thing usually happens at the wrong time and in the wrong place. A capacity for moving toward differentiation and transforming the drive will not arise until the state of identity has been dissolved. This requires a confrontation of the drive as a thou, as something that is not I, as something separate from ourselves. Only at this point can the inner dialogue begin. Until then, the drive remains unconscious, primitive, and destructive. Only after the identity has been dissolved by learning to experience the drive as an autonomous entity that is separate from the ego, do we get a chance to choose a right time and place and to develop the positive potential of the drive. Interestingly, the only line that seems to be correctly out of its cage is the second, suggesting a situation in which an intuitive inner wisdom takes proper precedence over the usual firm correctness of reason. I'm going to go back to our primary hexagram and read our changing line 5. That will be a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here some places you may find yourself. It takes precedence over all other elements. And changing line 5 again has the general context of strength and self-determination, clear vision, being in command. Changing line 5 of hexagram 31, which James Dekorne calls initiative. The fifth line dynamic shows one moving the flesh along the spine above the heart. There will be no occasion for repentance. Wilhelm/Baines, the influence shows itself in the back of the neck. No remorse. Blowfold, sensation in the fleshy covering of the spinal column. No regret. Lou, stimulation in the middle of the back. No remorse. Conflict, perhaps one's strong opinions will create discord. One can expect difficulty in carrying out his plans. Only small ventures will succeed. Ritsuma/Karcher, conjoining one's neck without repenting. Slofnessy, feeling his thigh, spine, there is no regret. Cleary, 1. Sensing in the flesh of the back, there is no regret. What separates the mind of Tao from the human ego mind is but a hairbreadth. Sensing it in the flesh of the back means it is near the heart. The mind that is not mind is called the true mind. It is open awareness unobscured. This is sensitivity preserving the mind of Tao without the human mentality. Wu, he moves his upper back muscles. There will be no regret. Commentary, Confucius/Leg. He tries to move the flesh along the spine above the heart. His aim is trivial. Wilhelm/Baines. The will is directed to the ramifications. Blofeld. This betokens inability to impose our will as yet. Ritsuma/Karcher. Purpose, the tips indeed. Tips, Mo, are growing ends, outermost twigs, last, most distant. Cleary 2, the aim is concluded. Wu, his affection is at the top. Leg. The symbolism of line 5 refers to a part of the body behind the heart and is supposed to indicate an ineffective influence. The triviality of the aim explains the ineffectiveness of the movement, but since it is free from selfish motivations, it is nothing to be repented of. Notes and paraphrases. Su. The man's goals are trivial, although free from selfish motives. Wing. Look within to determine the depth of your influence on external matters. People with a profound inner resolve can accomplish much. Those with shallow roots cannot exert significant external influence. Editor. Despite the no remorse, this can be a less than positive line. The influence here doesn't come from the heart, but from a region near the heart. It isn't that the motivations are insincere, it's that they miss the mark. Trivial, Leg and Su, means of little or no value, a fair synonym for illusion. At a deeper level, Wilhelm comments, what takes place in the depths of one's being, in the unconscious, can neither be called forth nor prevented by the conscious mind. It is true that if we cannot be influenced ourselves, we cannot influence the outside world. If this is the only changing line, the new hexagram is number 62, small powers, with its corresponding line portraying a lack of understanding of hidden matters. This can sometimes imply things within the situation which are beyond the ego's immediate comprehension. A quote from Jung, The Symbolic Life. To educate men to a faith they do not understand is certainly a well-meant undertaking, but one runs the risk of creating an attitude that believes everything it does not understand. But one runs the risk of creating an attitude that believes everything it does not understand. Three possible succinct definitions for changing line 5 that James Dekorne came up with, A, B, and C. A is, although your motives are sincere, they are not in accordance with reality. Sincere illusions are still illusions. B, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. The image suggests erroneous actions or motivations. Alternate. Cleary's Taoist commentary describes the mind of Tao, able to manifest autonomously when the ego mind does not impede it, a very high and unfortunately rare state of consciousness. Wing's paraphrase captures the dual nature of this line quite well. C. The mind of Tao supersedes ego-mindedness, or the self can manifest when the ego doesn't take the initiative. We'll now read from I-ming's Taoist I Ching, which he wrote in 1796 as a Taoist adept. It's very alchemical in nature. Our primary hexagram 31, sensitivity. Sensitivity is developmental. It is beneficial to be correct. Marriage brings good fortune. Explanation. Sensitivity means feeling and influence. As for the qualities of the hexagram, above is lake, joyous, and below is mountain, still. Firmness rests within, flexibility rests without. Stillness is the substance of joyfulness. Joyfulness is the function of stillness. This hexagram has the meaning of yin and yang responding to each other, so it is called sensitivity. This hexagram represents harmonization of yin and yang. It follows on the previous hexagram, pitfalls. In pitfalls, yin traps yang. Yang is not strong and yin is not docile. Yin and yang do not combine. So this work of harmonization is indispensable. But harmonization of yin and yang calls for spontaneity, not force. Spontaneity is non-conscious sensitivity, while force is conscious sensitivity. With non-conscious sensitivity, yin and yang harmonize with each other, without any insensitivity. With conscious sensitivity, yin and yang are individually separate, and sensitivity has limits. Therefore, in sensitivity, there is a path of development, but though the path of sensitivity is developmental, there is right and wrong non-consciousness, and there is right and wrong consciousness. You cannot say that the non-consciousness of a dead tree or cold ashes is developmental, is a developmental path of sensitivity. Dead trees and cold ashes are purely negative with no positivity. How could that be called sensitivity? Sensitivity means the subtle communion of yin and yang, as in the image of the hexagram, wherein a boy and girl are together, each unminding, till the yin and yang energies are full and their feelings stir and they naturally become sensitive to each other. This is unaffected sensitivity. How can you take ignorant mindlessness to be sensitivity? Non-consciousness or mindlessness in the proper sense of the term means there is no human mentality. When there is no human mentality, there is the mind of Tao. The mind of Tao is a mind that is not minding. Minding means having the human mentality. When one has the human mentality, one lacks the mind of Tao. The mind of the human mentality is not the real mind. The mind of Tao is real. The human mentality is artificial. When you use the artificial mind, sensing is inaccurate. Yin and yang dichotomize. When you use the real mind, sensing is true. Yin and yang commune. Whether yin senses and yang responds, or yang senses and yin responds, they are equally ruled by the mind of Tao, and sense correctly. When sensitivity is true, not sensing by mentality, what is there that cannot be sensed? What sensing is not potentially beneficial? In terms of correct sensitivity, no one in the world compares to a chaste woman. The virtues of a woman are based on chastity and calm, not easily losing herself to others. She will wait for a good partner to have feeling. This is feeling not by the heart, but by truth. In the qualities of the hexagram, first there is stillness, after that joy. Joy comes from stillness. When practitioners of the Tao harmonize yin and yang, causing yin and yang to communicate sensitively, if they can take the virtue of a chaste woman as their sensitivity, then whatever they sense will be right. Tranquil and imperturbable, yet sensitive and effective. Sensitive and effective, yet tranquil and imperturbable. They rest in the proper place, whether they go along and with things or reverse them, all is as they will, and they attain that good fortune. And we will read our supporting hexagram 62 that puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. Preponderance of the small. Preponderance of the small is developmental, beneficial if correct. It is suitable for a small affair, but not for a great one. The call left by a flying bird should not rise but descend. This is very auspicious. Explanation. Predominance of the small means that yin, I I meant to say predominance of the small that entire time. Sorry. Predominance of the small means that yin exceeds yang. As for the qualities of the hexagram, above is thunder, active, and below is mountain, still. Acting with restraint, basing action on stillness. Stillness is stable and action is not on a large scale. Also, in the body of the hexagram, 2 yangs are inside 4 yins. Inwardly fulfilled, outwardly empty. Inwardly firm, outwardly flexible. Using the small to nurture the great. It is therefore called predominance of the small. This hexagram represents being fulfilled and thus acting empty. It follows on the previous hexagram, discipline. In discipline, one can be joyful even in danger, inwardly being autonomous, using things of the world to practice the principles of the Tao, using social activities to restore celestial qualities. The foundation of life, stable, one can enter from striving into non-striving. In spiritual alchemy, before primordial true yang has been restored, one should empty the mind to seek to fill the belly. Once primordial true yang has returned, one should fill the belly and also empty the mind. The achievement of emptying the mind is the means to operate the natural true fire, to burn away the mundane energy of acquired conditioning until one is freed from it. This is why predominance of the small is developmental. However, though predominance of the small is developmental, it is only beneficial if correct. If it is not correct, it is not developmental. The correct way of predominance of the small is that action not stray from tranquility, that action be carried out with tranquility. With movement and stillness as one, the real person plunges into the profound depths, floating about yet keeping within the circle, neither indifferent nor obsessed, keeping a very subtle consistency. This is suitable for a small affair, but not a great one. A small affair means non-striving. A great affair means striving. Striving is the way to find yang. Non-striving is the way to nurture yang. Once one has filled the belly, it is appropriate that the small predominate to nurture yang. If you are capable of the great but not the small, you will not only be unable to preserve yang, yang will even be damaged. Predominance of the small, being beneficial when correct, means it is beneficial in small action, not in great action. Beneficial in small stillness, not in great stillness. When one acts yet is able to be still, being active in the midst of stillness, stopping in the appropriate place and acting on that, even as one acts, one does not go beyond the appropriate position. This is like the call left by a flying bird should not rise but descend. Though a bird flies up, its call goes down. This means action not straying from tranquility. Action not straying from tranquility should not rise but descend, the small predominating and nurturing the great, extracting lead and adding mercury, incubating for 10 months. When the spiritual embryo is completely developed, with a thunderous cry the infant appears. When nurturance is sufficient, the auspicious outcome is great. The small predominates, but the good it does is great. Sublime and subtle indeed is the predominance of the small that is beneficially correct. We will go back and read our changing line 5 of our primary hexagram 31 that puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here some places you may find yourself. It takes precedence over all other elements. Changing line 5 has the general context of strength and self-determination, clear vision, being in command. Changing line 5 of hexagram 31, sensitivity. Sensing in the flesh of the back, there is no regret. Explanation. At the border of yin above and yang below, controlling both, using them in a balanced way, The mind of Tao is always present. The human mentality does not arise. Dealing with things as they are, all takes place without minding. This is likened to sensing in the flesh of the back. The flesh of the back is above the heart. It is near the heart, yet apart from the heart. What separates the mind of Tao from the human mind is but a hairbreadth. Sensing into the flesh of the back means it is near the heart, mind, but really not the heart, mind. The mind that is not mind is called the true mind. The true mind is immaterial yet not void. It has no location. It is open awareness unobscured. This is called no mind. Sensing mind with no mind, though there be mind, it too returns to no mind. No mind, no regret. Integrated with celestial principle, one rests in the highest good without vacillation. This is sensitively preserving the mind of Tao without the human mentality. I'll also read the bottom section of this that talks about all the lines. The 6 lines each have a path of sensitivity. One may sense with the human mind or may sense with the mind of Tao. One may have the mind of Tao and also sense with the human mind, or one may turn away from the human mind and only sense with the mind of Tao. These are not equal in terms of right and wrong. Only when one rests in the highest good and senses it is the mind of Tao always present, while the human mentality vanishes forever. True yin and true yang subtly commune, crossing the gap, like magnet attracting iron, and then the gold elixir spontaneously forms out of nothingness. Also read about each of our hexagrams from the commentary section in the back, which says nothing about our changing lines, just so you know. Hexagram 31, sensing, lake above, mountain below. There is a lake on a mountain. Thus does the superior person accept people with openness. Sensing means feeling. Above is lake, below is mountain. There is a lake on a mountain. A lake is open, a mountain is high. To be high yet capable of openness, this is the image of sensing. What superior people see in this is that just as there can be no lake atop a mountain if there is no open space, similarly, people can't be sensitive to anything if their minds are not open. Therefore, they empty themselves of what they have and receive enhancement from another. The Taoist master Zhu Yang said, "Stop exercising clever artifice as though it were effective practice. Recognize the other's method of immortality. The other is another person, but it does not mean an ordinary person in the world. It means the original, immortal, true person inherent in oneself. Because of mixing with acquired conditioning, it has run away and become ineffective. Long covered up and buried away, it is lost and does not return. Though it may show up occasionally, students who cling to the temporal, who stick to the conditioned, miss it even when it is right before them, and are unable to sense it. This is all because of inability to refine the self. If one is unable to refine oneself, personal desires fill the being, and their sprouts clog the opening of awareness. Being filled and not open, whenever another comes, there is no room for reception. Superior people who practice the Tao refine themselves and master their minds, getting rid of all acquired pollutants, so that their minds are open. When the mind is open, the primordial energy comes from nothingness, so that one can receive enhancement from the other and become fulfilled. One senses by openness, the other responds with fulfillment. The small goes and the great comes. The gold elixir of immortality spontaneously crystallizes. This is like a high mountain being empty and open on top and receiving the moisture of a lake. It happens spontaneously, without any intention that it be so. And our supporting hexagram 62. excessive smallness, thunder above, mountain below. There is thunder over a mountain, excessively small. Thus, the superior people are excessively differential in conduct, excessively sad in mourning, excessively frugal in consumption. Excessive smallness means excess in being small. Above is thunder, below is mountain. There is thunder over a mountain. When thunder is up in the sky, its sound reaches afar, but when thunder is over a mountain, its sound is muffled. This is the image of excessive smallness. What superior people see in this is that the practitioners of the Tao should minimize themselves in their daily activities and not become too grand. This is because it is permissible to go to excess in being small, but not in being grand. Therefore, superior people are excessively differential in conduct, excessively sad in mourning, and excessively frugal in consumption. It is not right to be too differential in conduct, but when one is differential, one does not look down on people or become arrogant. So there is no harm in being excessively differential. It is not right to be too sad in mourning, but when one is sad, there is grief in the heart and one esteems nature and life, so there is no harm in being excessively sad. It is not right to be too frugal in consumption, but when one is frugal, one does not waste natural resources and is content with what one has, so there is no harm in being excessively frugal. These three things are all examples of excessive smallness, excessive without being too extreme. This is how it is with such small matters. When it comes to the great matter of nature and life, one must know the appropriate moments to advance and withdraw. To sustain and negate, one must know the principles of filling and emptying, effacing and fostering. Since even the slightest miss can result in enormous loss, no excess is permissible. In the image of the hexagram, there is thunder over a mountain. The mountain is still, the thunder is in movement. Action is carried forth by means of stillness. Action is based on stillness. Obviously, the small may be excessive, but the great may not be excessive. We will now read a randomly card-drawn chapter from the Tao Te Ching, or possibly several. See what we get. Happy full moon, full wolf moon to everybody. Hope you are well. Chapter 48. Translation I'll be reading from is by G.F. Fang and Jane English. Chapter 48 of the Tao Te Ching. In the pursuit of learning, every day something is acquired. In the pursuit of Tao, every day something is dropped. Less and less is done until non-action is achieved. When nothing is done, nothing is left undone. The world is ruled by letting things take their course. It cannot be ruled by interfering. Kisses.